So, what's your preferred pronoun? It's no longer a binary world of he or she, and your sex can be quite different from your gender. Let's discuss this now with Alison Gray, the Deputy Principal of Westerford High School in Cape Town, that's pioneering a way forward on how to treat this issue sensitively. Alison, thank you so much for joining us. I suppose I have to start by asking, what is your preferred pronoun?
My preferred pronouns are she, her. Thanks for asking that.
All right. And I suppose it's new territory, especially for the older generation. Is it not rude or intrusive to ask what someone's pronoun is?
You know, Sally, I think that's what Westerford's tried to do by introducing the badges, is that instead of asking a pronoun and instead of asking kids in this instance to declare or to confess to their pronouns, by wearing a badge, all that is eliminated, and you're just simply reacting on what you see in front of you.
And how's it going? How are the children and teens reacting? It was interesting to listen to the pupil who said that when they were in primary school there were some awful experiences, but things were much better now. How are young people responding to this badge campaign?
Yeah. Look, I can only speak for what I can see at Westerford, and I think the younger generation has a much better understanding of, you know, gender identity and sexual orientation than the older generation. And I'm not saying that, you know, Westerford has arrived in any kind of way. We still are very much a progressing school. But I must say that what's come back to me has only been positive. That doesn't mean that everyone agrees with it, and that's amongst pupils and staff. But it does mean that even though people might not agree with it, they are still sort of doing so in a very respectful way, and in a way that creates dialogue rather than animosity.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about parents, because some parents are open, eager to learn and to embrace what is fairly new territory to most of us. But others feel, you know, this is political correctness gone mad. You were clearly born a girl, so you're a she. What do you say to the parents that just think it's gone a bit crazy?
Look, it's a difficult one, and I can't say with any surety what the answer is, but I just feel, you know, that if we try to see each other as human beings and try and treat each other with dignity, respect and kindness, you know, it doesn't change who you are, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation. And I think, you know, there is the older generation who feels that this has become, as you say, totally confusing, totally unrealistic, but this is the world we're living in, and it's about trying to understand and trying to break the stigma that goes along with this. And the only way you can understand is to ask the questions and to get the information.
And that's the other thing that I wanted to ask, is that a lot of people also similarly just don't want to offend anyone. Of course, in the business community, we don't walk around with badges with our pronouns. You say you've eliminated that tricky issue of asking. But what is your advice on the right way to handle the pronoun question? Should you simply just ask everyone? You know, because if you don't, then you're almost prejudging if you ask someone. What's your pronoun?
So my personal response to that is that, you know, whichever way we look at the world, the majority of the population does define themselves as he or she. And so, you know, for me, I would probably continue to call people by he and she, and I would then appreciate if the person I was speaking to just said to me, actually, Alison, you know, my preferred pronoun is they, them, or whatever. So I think that's the way I would handle it, is to continue as normal, in inverted commas, and hope that the person would be comfortable enough to say, this is how I would prefer to be known.
Talk to us about the difference between sex and gender, because I think that the terms create confusion and uncertainty sometimes.
There's a brilliant diagram on Google, if you Google the genderbread person, and it very clearly explains the 4 axes. So your sex, you asked for sex and gender, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so your sex is really biologically what you're born with. So that's your hormones, your genitals, and obviously you have females and males, and in the middle of the spectrum there are the intersex babies that are born. Gender is more of a social construct. In other words, you know, when we come into the world, if you're born a female, you're probably already on the back foot compared to males. So gender is very much like race, a social construct. And you know, we can live out our genders by the way we express ourselves. So the third continuum is gender expression. So I can still define myself as a woman, but I might decide to dress more or behave more masculine, you know, on particular days. But I do think there's, you know, for me, one of the most difficult things must be being born with the genitals of one sex, but feeling and thinking in your head that you are most definitely the opposite gender. It's really like being in the wrong body, and that must be hugely distressing for people.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we've only recently started to fully embrace, whereas certainly in my generation it was completely the norm, you know, are you homosexual or heterosexual? And it was perhaps my parents' generation who were a little bit hesitant or not sure if it was going in the right direction. Do you think that it's going to become increasingly normalized, or do you think we're going to see this sort of push back against it? Because certainly there is this pushback against this understanding of gender fluidity.
Yeah. Look, I think there is always going to be a pushback. I don't think we're ever all going to get onto the same page as far as something like this is concerned. But I was actually talking to someone who's doing a series of articles for Parent 24 about the experiences of trans pupils at schools. And I just thought, you know, with the pronoun badges and with us trying to normalize, as you say, that people are just people, I wonder if in 20, 30 years' time, this whole social construct of gender might just disappear, you know, and we will just see people for who they are in front of us.
Yeah, and I was wondering, is it going to become not perhaps acceptable to say, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? It might just be good evening, everybody. I want to ask a final question. As a teacher, for those parents who perhaps have a child who is gender fluid or they suspect might be, and they're not too sure if they should approach the child to discuss it, how they create the space to talk about this, because we are so aware of the high suicide rate amongst teens. We're so aware of bullying, of children feeling desperately isolated, particularly in the teenage years where kids want to belong to a group. What's your advice?
Yeah, you know, parents will know with their relationship with their child, because there's no sort of one size fits all. But what I would say is find out as much as you can before you go to your child. And sometimes, you know, Sally, not always, but sometimes kids are just waiting to be asked. You know, they're waiting for someone to almost push them into answering. And that's not everyone. And like I said, it's not going to suit every family. But I certainly would try and get as much information as possible. I think if things like this come on the television, rather than say, you know, make derogatory negative comments about homosexuals or about people who are gender fluid, rather talk about it in a more positive way in a family setting, so that children also feel that a little bit more confidence in opening up to their parents. So I really think it's about getting the information, making the positive comments if there are public depictions of this, and then trying to engage in a conversation with your child.
Fascinating, and thank you so much for the input and the strides that you're making. Alison Gray, the Deputy Principal of Westerford High School in Cape Town.